The Lighthouse is a brilliantly trippy, beautifully shot, and incredibly well-acted film that is odd enough to keep you watching through the entire thing. The Lighthouse stars Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson in probably his best acting role to date. And what it is, in essence, it's basically just a story of two wikis or two lighthouse keepers that are stranded on an island for 4 weeks to start with before a storm hits that forces them to remain there longer. And it deals with kind of their isolation or total isolation from the world, kind of their adversarial, headbutting personalities, and a little bit of homoeroticism thrown in about two men being in such close quarters together and what possible feelings might develop, whether or not they're long-term or not. But it's an absolutely amazing film, in my opinion. It's one of the best films I've seen of this past year. And part of that is because the acting is so good. Robert Pattinson is one of those people that he has a lot of stinkers out there. He has some films where he gives a pretty good performance. And this one, like I said, I think it's his best performance to date. He really shows he actually has some acting chops and probably has a lot more to do. Willem Dafoe, of course, is always fabulous in whatever he's in, and especially in this one because he's playing this just really nasty old cantankerous man who is kind of a dick, but he's also one of those people that may or may not be trying to teach you a lesson, whether it's a hard lesson, and then try to maybe let you learn a little bit from his facts or his failures in life, so to speak. So the film starts out with Pattinson showing up on the island for a 4-week stint as the secondary wiki or secondary keeper, basically the underling to Willem Dafoe's character in this one. And he gets there and things kind of start out. Dafoe's making him do all of these really menial tasks like going out, throwing out their chamber pots, scrubbing the floors, mopping them several times. At one point he yells at him for several minutes saying, "It's dirty, you can see the floor, you didn't clean it." He's like, "I mopped it twice." He's like, "No you didn't, you're lying, I'm gonna write you up in the log, I'm gonna tell you need to do it." And you can just see Pattinson starting to like really break down underneath this pressure. He even makes a comment one time, "I'm not somebody's wife," which it's kind of funny because throughout the film they bicker like an old married couple. Pattinson being more kind of this woman-esque figure in terms of him making him do all of the menial tasks, while Dafoe's character gets the primary task of monitoring the light on the lighthouse and making sure it doesn't go out. Well, the first couple of days or week or so that he's on there, he sees Thomas Wake, which is Willem Dafoe's character. He sees him going up, sitting in front of the light, stripping butt naked, and just sitting there with his arms spread out as the light circles by him. He asks him multiple times, the book says we're supposed to share this duty. The book says, and he's like, "Damn what the book says. If you read the book, you would know you need to do all of your work right and correct the first time. This is my job. I'm the head wiki, and I'm going to do it." And it kind of pisses Pattinson off, but he makes him go off and do these tasks. And then on the first night, Pattinson finds a little mermaid figurine that has like some breasts carved out of it, and he basically carries that around with him the whole time. They're on a desolate island. There's like no trees. It's just rocks, and there's obviously the phallic-shaped lighthouse. And there's several scenes where you can see Pattinson, and he's obviously has a bunch of built-up sexual frustration and tension that he goes and relieves by masturbating to this little mermaid figure. And one of the things is the sound design on this film is extraordinary. Basically, they have like these big sirens and like fog horns and things like that are constantly going off, and they speed up and slow down and kind of matches like the inner turmoil or the slow drip into insanity that's going on, especially with Pattinson's character, because you can tell the Willem Dafoe's character is already pretty much a crazy old man from the first scene. Pattinson's one that he has a lot of troubles from his past life. He brought him onto the island because he's obviously trying to escape something, and he sees it, and like the sound just kind of like just takes over everything, and it's very, very touching because you can see that he's starting to lose his grip with reality. And when that point happens in the film, it kind of makes you start to question anything that comes from there in the film and whether or not what you're seeing is actually real, if it's maybe just all in their mind or one of them's mind, or if it's all being kind of created based upon what the Willem Dafoe's character is telling to Robert Pattinson. So after a few weeks in, there's a point where Willem Dafoe keeps trying to get Robert Pattinson's character drunk, and he's like, "No, I'm just going to have a smoke." He's like, "Come on now, you need to get her drunk. It's bad luck to leave a toast unfinished." So there's several of those instances where he tells him some superstition and how to prevent that from happening. He also tells him it's bad luck to kill a seabird because there's a gull that just keeps harassing Robert Pattinson's character. And then finally it speeds up a little bit to where they get to a point where Pattinson's about to leave. He goes to get some water, and he pumps it, and like this nasty blood and stuff comes out of it. The film's in black and white, so there's a lot of contrast between the darks and the lights of the film, and they do a really good job blending it. Plus, it's also a very tight aspect ratio. It's almost a complete square, and it moves everything in, so all of the characters are really operating within a very small frame in terms of the camera. So even though they're in a room, it's a large room, they're both in like a two shots, very close, and you can kind of feel the tension and them headbutting each other back and forth. Okay, so he sees the blood in the water. He then goes out and he finds a dying seagull like flapping around in the water. Before he can do anything, this other seagull flies up, one with missing eye. It's been kind of harassing him. He like starts pecking at him. He grabs it and just starts beating it viciously against this cistern, killing it. And again, it's in black and white, but you can see the contrast between the blood from the seagull that's expelled all over the cistern. And then he tosses it to the side. And then, you kind of have a little moment where Willem Dafoe's character makes a comment about it. He said, there's a storm coming. The winds have changed, boy. The winds have changed. It's going to get bad. And of course, it's going to get bad just as Pattinson's character is about to leave. So what ends up happening is, they go inside, they get drunk because of the storm, and they really start to enjoy themselves. And at this point, Pattinson finally gets drunk. He starts talking to him, tells him he was a timberman, and he had no more of it. He left, he came here, and it's kind of leading to a point where the Dafoe character is like, you don't need to be spilling your beans. You don't need to be spilling your beans. And he says this several times to him, and a lot of times you don't know if he's necessarily saying it or if it's just coming in his head, because at this point they really just go into a drunken stupor. And then they find out that Robert Pattinson goes out, and he's just starting to really be really trippy. He's seeing various things like logs floating, a body floating in the logs. He runs out and tries to get the body, and he sinks down into the water a little bit. And then he all of a sudden flashes back on the beach, and he's not actually in the water. And then he runs out and finds a mermaid, a woman mermaid. And, he's obviously using that as some kind of sexual release. He doesn't know if he's seeing it. He runs back in and tries to tell Willem Dafoe's character that, there's a mermaid out there, but he doesn't say it. Dafoe tells him that almost all of our rations are gone. We got to, how are we going to survive? There's maybe some more rations. So they go and dig up some extra rations that were buried, find out that there's not any extra rations, it's just more liquor. So they drink the more liquor, they get really drunk. And then there's kind of a really tense moment where they are kind of talking to each other, and they dance around a little bit. And then they get really close. And you could tell it's a little bit of a homoerotic moment. And they just kind of look at each other before they can get that kiss that you think it's building up to it, because it is kind of a release that these people have had throughout the isolation. They're the only people there. They're the only ones that they can look at or see or have any kind of connection to. They pull away, and then, they kind of laugh it off or whatever, and then go about their own business. And then flash forward a little bit, and Pattinson's at this point, he's reaching his breaking point, so he runs out and tries to get into the little raft or small little boat and take it out. But then Dafoe's character runs out with the hatchet and just starts breaking up the boat, and then chases Robert Pattinson into the house. He runs into the house. He then flips the story and says, no, you're the one that destroyed the boat. You're the one that ate up through all the rations. I've told you, I've been telling you about, we've got to save, we've got to ration this out, or else we're not going to survive. And while he's saying this, he's kind of talking, and the camera moves in a bit of a way to show you that there's not really a clear interpretation in terms of who's telling the truth here, or what is actual reality versus what is perceived here. And again, Pattinson's character keeps trying to get into the top of the lighthouse to see the light, but he won't let him do it. The storm keeps raging, and then they have like a really blowout night where they've drank through all their alcohol, so then they go and get some turpentine, mix a little bit of honey to make some homemade liquor, and they start drinking that. And at that point, it really gets trippy here, because both of them are, and hallucinating or going insane, or not really able to tell exactly what's real and what's fake or what's imagined in this point. And at this point, then Robert Pattinson then just starts to spill his guts, tell him that his name is not really Efren Winslow, that his name is something else, and that he took this name of his foreman while he was a logger after this accident killed his foreman, and then he just had to get away. So it hints at a possibility that he murdered this guy, or the guy died because of his inability to stop something, or his desire not to stop something from happening. An accident unfolded, and that's when Willem Dafoe is like, "You spilled your beans. You shouldn't have spilled your beans." And then that big storm that's still raging outside breaks through all the windows, those waves in the house, and then it cuts a little bit, and they wake up. The entire furniture, everything inside the house is just strewn about along the ground. And then Pattinson ends up finding the log that he tried to get earlier and was unable to get it. And he finds the log, he looks at it, and he reads it and sees that that Willem Dafoe's character has written a bunch of lies about him, saying he's not a good worker, and he recommends severance without pay. And this really pisses off Pattinson's character. So what he does is he gets mad, confronts him over this, and they kind of have a little fight out. And then they start hitting on each other, and Pattinson knocks him down and starts beating him up. And while he's doing this, he sees visions of both the mermaid, the mermaid's fins and stuff that looks kind of like a vagina, and then like tentacles and stuff, where Dafoe's character turns into like this sea monster or a kraken, and he's like choking him out, beating him out, and then finally he ends up pulling back off of him. Dafoe is submitted to him in a scene where, to show his dominance over Willem Dafoe's character, he puts a rope on it around his neck and like leads him out to the hole where the rations, or the extra rations, were, tosses him in the hole and starts kind of burying him alive, throwing dirt on him. And he hops down in the hole, steals his keys from him, runs back in the house because he's finally going to go upstairs and look at the light in the lighthouse. Then all of a sudden Willem Dafoe runs in, slaps him with an axe across the back. Then they kind of fight a little bit, or slaps him with an axe on the shoulder. Blood starts shooting out, and he kind of knocks him down. He grabs the axe, and then all you see is slam the axe down. A little bit of blood shoots up into the air, and at this point, Dafoe's character is dead in essence, with Robert Pattinson then covered in blood, drunkenly stumbles up the lighthouse through the spiral staircase, all the way gets to the top, unlocks the lock finally, opens the gate, and just, instead of crawling up and get out of it, he just crawls up, the light spins, stops looking at him, the door opens up, and then it's a beautiful shot where it turns around, and you can see Pattinson's character, and then he just starts screaming, and then the blinding light just slowly like completely envelops him. So you can see like the film, it was shot on film, black and white, and it's mostly black behind him with his face, and the outlines are soft and you can kind of see it. And then because the light just envelops over him, it just takes control and it stretches out, and the whole frame in essence goes white before Pattinson all of a sudden falls, breaks his leg, and then falls all the way down the spiral staircase landing. And from that point, it kind of cuts, goes quiet for a bit, and then opens up on a scene where Robert Pattinson is splayed out, and the camera's slowly moving away to reveal more and more of him. And he's laid out Prometheus style, butt-ass naked with, his guts and bowels and stuff spilling out. And then there, that nasty old seagull is just sitting there eating his guts, stealing, eating his insides while he's helpless to move and just kind of there. And it's, like I said, it's a very trippy film. It's very good. It's classified kind of as a horror film. It's not really much of a horror film to me. It is definitely a psychological thriller, one that doesn't really tell you straightforward what it is, and I think that's a great thing not to do in this film, because it does leave open several different interpretations. And one of them being that Prometheus steals fire from the gods and brings it down to mankind, but then he's punished to be strapped to a rock or chained to a mountainside where a giant eagle comes and eats his liver every single day. The liver regrows, and then he has to go through the same thing again. And that could be one for this film, where what's actually happened is just this cycle or this loop that's stuck, and the characters may actually be the same character, and that could be possibly why they didn't actually kiss, because they're the same character and one of them's just imagining it. Because by the end of the film, they both end up having like the same injuries. What's his face? Willem Dafoe's character has a broken or a false leg, so he hobbles around. And then by the end of the film, Robert Pattinson's character's broke his leg, and he would in essence be hobbling around. And you don't ever really see anybody else in the film outside of the mermaid, a couple flashback images where Robert Pattinson sees somebody else as being superimposed on Willem Dafoe's character, but you don't really have anybody else there. It's completely contained on these two characters for the vast majority of the film, approximately 2 hours or so. And it's a very good filming. The acting is first rate in this one. It's definitely well worth a watch just because of the acting, but it does require you to go into the film with an open mind because it is something that's so mental or so psychologically taxing, with a lot of the sounds and then the cinematography, which is beautiful, and then obviously a lot of the movements and stuff kind of leads you into this false sense of security, and then all of a sudden it'll divert over here and the big foghorn sounds out and kind of like makes you cringe a little bit before you figure out exactly what's going on. And it's one of those it's a very artistic film, brilliant cinematography. I think it worked amazingly well in black and white. If the film was in color, I don't think a lot of it would have worked, because you would have had the contrast of more colors, browns, blacks for the rocks, water, the whites, things like that. But just having it black and white the whole time, it really leads you to this like gritty, like toned down, very claustrophobic setting, and it really helps out a lot. I would absolutely recommend this film. And just with the prefaces that it is a little bit out there. It is a lot more artistic than a normal mainstream film, but it is very good and very well worth watching, especially for the two actors' roles in this, Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson, who both did an excellent job. Other than that, thank you. Feel free to like, subscribe, and share, and have a good day.